quasi-extinction threshold. That was the word. That was a wonderful story. That was a wonderful story. You do have beautiful country. What I wanted to talk about here was we're right in the middle of the spring Chinook season right now, so fish are coming over the dams. They're coming back home, and you'll hear people for political reasons or whatnot saying, "What's the problem? We've got all these fish coming back. They're 25% larger return than they were last year." Various things like this. But we got to keep our eye on the ball. Those kinds of annual fluctuations that's what happens in life and biology. There are annual fluctuations. But it's the trend. It's what's happening on whole with the runs and has been for a long time. So this is about keeping your eye on the ball. So do I point it up here, or where do I? Okay, so this graphic here, this is the 2022 adult returns. So I want to point out some things here. So this is Bonneville Dam on the left, and this is Lower Granite. And the red, I don't know how well it comes up, but the red line at this peak right here is this year. And then the black line here is what's been happening on the 10-year average. Then the lower line there is what happened last year. So you can see that there has been an increase here, which is a great thing. I mean, to see any kind of a little improvement is wonderful. So the preseason forecasts did increase 25% over last year, the daily and above the 10-year average. And the total abundance is a 50% increase over what happened last year. And there are increasing harvest opportunities that go along with that. These are all positive, but you got to keep these in context, like I say, with what's happening in general. So the returns are really made up of two components, the hatchery return and the wild return. This is a graphic here that shows the spring Chinook return for the Lower Snake River Comp hatcheries. So the Lower Snake River Comp Plan was a system of hatcheries that were built as compensation to do mitigation for the effects of the Lower Snake River dams, to replace 48 to 50% of the loss of those fish. So that red line right there, that is what the goal is. There's about 12 hatcheries that are part of the Lower Snake River Comp Plan. 7 of them produce 10 million fish every year. This is what the returns have done. The Lower Snake Comp Plan, the hatcheries have never met their goal. They've never met the number of fish that they were promised to provide, ever. So people who say we're doing well, we're doing better, just look at the hatchery returns. The hatchery returns, those are the fish that everybody fishes on. They're not even meeting their goals. They've never met their goals. The promise was never met. Now let's take a look at the wild returns. So for the wild fish, this graph here shows this is the delisting threshold. And the returns, of course, are from, gosh, I can't even read it, 1975 to the last year. So here's how the returns have been. This is delisting here. Again, the fish are so low. This last number here is what we estimated was going to happen in 2022. It's the forecast. So the 10-year trend has been negative 18% every year. The 5-year average is 7,000 fish. 2021 return was 8,592, and this year's return is predicted to be 12,000 fish. 42% of the 30 some odd populations of spring Chinook in the Snake River Basin are at what's called a quasi-extinction threshold. That means there's 50 or fewer fish on the spawning grounds, not for 1 year, but for 4 consecutive years. So 4 consecutive years in an area the size of the Middle Fork salmon, you have only 50 or fewer fish returning. So that's a tragedy. This is a kind of situation where you can just have any kind of situation happen, a landslide, severe drought, something happens, and you lose the genetics of that population. 50 or fewer fish on the spawning grounds for 4 consecutive years. Why do we want to focus on spring Chinook? Why are they so important? Well, at 1 million fish a year, historically, they were the most abundant anadromous fish in the Snake River Basin. They're essential for tribal ceremonial and subsistence harvest, and this is really important, is that they're essential for maintaining the treaty-reserved right to fish in all usual and accustomed areas. So the treaty right didn't say you can fish at a hatchery. It says you can fish in the Middle Fork salmon. It says you can fish everywhere that those fish are destined to come. So understanding that's what the tribe reserved when the United States got access to 13 million square miles, 13 million acres of land. Tribes have that right. The right needs to be practiced everywhere, not just at a hatchery at the end of a road. It has to be everywhere. That's what the tribes reserved. So that's why it's so important that spring Chinook be restored. And why focus on wild returns? Well, if you improve the wild returns, you're going to improve everything. You raise all boats. And these spring Chinook in the wild spring Chinook, they have the best chance. The Snake Basin habitat, where these fish are from, is essential for preserving the species just in general. It's mountain, and it's so much wilderness areas that encompass that habitat for the spring Chinook. So if, and as we see, and as Carol Evans talked about, a changing climate, as we see that this is going to be their refuge is going to be in the mountainous areas of the Snake River Basin in northeast Oregon and the big part of Idaho. That's where they have to return to. That's the only area that has that high mountain habitat, that has the snowpack, that isn't going to diminish. Some of this area here, some of the area down in the lower Snake, that's not where these fish need to go. Spring Chinook don't go there. Spring Chinook go to the mountains. Wild fish, not hatchery fish, are essential to delisting under the Endangered Species Act. You can't delist the fish, you can't have recovery of these fish, you can't have reduction of regulations and restraints by having a whole bunch of hatchery fish. You got to have the wild fish to get delisted under the Endangered Species Act. Now the tribe has been really successful in using hatcheries to restore fall Chinook, which is a different species than spring Chinook. Fall Chinook spawn in the main stems. We've been successful in that. We brought the fish from 300 fish to 80,000 fish. It's been a great program, but you can use hatcheries in only certain areas. Where we use those hatcheries that have restored fall Chinook have been along a road. They've been in acclimation sites next to a main river. And that's not the same situation. You can't put an acclimation site, you can't drive to the upper reaches of the Middle Fork salmon or to the upper Selway. You can't drive up there and acclimate these fish. You can't do it with hatcheries. We've tried a little bit. We can only do it in a couple places, but you can't do it through the big wild area. So, what you have to do, you can't grow your way out of it. You really have to address smolt to adult survival. You have to have more fish come back for all of them that leave. So this graphic here talks about smolt to adult survival. So the big difference here on this graph I want to show is that, so this is the main part of the snake that we're talking about, all this area in here. The fish that are here, they have a smolt to adult return of 0.8%. They're not replacing themselves. The fish that are up here in the Yakima, they've got a return 2.4%. The fish out of the John Day have got a higher return. The difference in this Now, keep in mind that this habitat here in the Yakima and the John Day, it's good, it's spring Chinook habitat, but it isn't anything like the big wild here in the Snake River Basin. This is where the best habitat really is. But the difference in between these returns and these are these 4 dams. So how does breaching the dams improve survival? Well, number one, it speeds passage down to the ocean. So you travel in a river, not in a series of reservoirs. Now the fish evolutionarily are developed to make it down to the ocean in a certain amount of time. Well, we've extended that period of time to a month. So they run out of reserves, they run out of their food by the time they reach the ocean. And on their way, they go through some higher water temperatures caused by, or some of the fish that return back rather, are going to hit those higher water temperatures caused by a reservoir system. On their way down, they have injury caused by the screens, the turbines, the bypasses, the spill, disorientation, predation, all of it associated with the dams. If you restore the river, you're going to increase sturgeon, false Chinook, other native species habitat, and you're going to reduce the predation. So much of what happens in the reservoirs is predation by invasives, essentially smallmouth bass, and I believe walleye are even there. And then think about this, is that there would be no barrier in between the very uppermost reaches of the Snake River, of the Salmon River, and the Tri-Cities. There's nothing else in their way, with the exception of those 4 dams. So to hit on this one again is, in a changing climate, we really do need to focus on where the future is. The only way these fish are going to have a chance is if they can get back to the mountains. Otherwise we lose them. We're losing them every year. And we need to turn that around. We need to be able to reach the dams to have those fish get to where they're supposed to be. That should be really a significant effort, endeavor by us as citizens of the United States. I don't know that we've ever been able to accomplish any kind of a very large scale, altruistic, if you will, effort to restore something for non-monetary purposes. But we have the chance right now, and we certainly should do that. So in closing, the bottleneck for all this area, all this wilderness area in the Snake River Basin is these 4 dams. The subsidized services that those dams provide, irrigation, transportation, energy, they're all essential, but they can all be replaced. There's a different way of doing that. And mind you, too, there is no right to be able to transport your product down the river. There is no right to be able to irrigate your crops from the river. The only right that there is for these fish to exist and the right of the tribes to be able to harvest these fish. No one else gave up anything. No one else gave up 13 million acres of land in order to reserve that right. So the fish, they need half a chance, they need 4 less dams, and they require a river. Thank you.